Life is a dream, time like a stream, carries our burdens away. Never despair, joys everywhere, love can befriend you today. Free from all care, like birds on the air, soar above griefs and worries, seek joy and be gay. Often on earth, things of great worth, worldly ambitions defy. Sometimes a friend helps us ascend up from life's cares to the sky. Love is a star, though shining afar, it can guide us and help us toward light to draw nigh. Love is a star, though shining afar, it can guide us and help us toward light to draw nigh.
Very nice to see you all. As you know, we are concluding this month with a celebration of Swamiji's life, because last Tuesday, the 21st, is the day that he left the body. And many of us feel and even felt that when he left the body, it actually freed his consciousness to reach us even more effectively than when he was in the body, sort of tied down to that body and so on. We spent so much effort at that time praying for his health, watching him have to struggle with the body. Inwardly, he never struggled. He didn't feel upset about it and so on. He said so. But of course, it can be a burden to feel that. And when, we'll take a survey of us all when we're 86 and see how it's going. But what we wanted to do this year was to share different aspects of Swamiji's legacy. There are so many facets of his legacy, which include, of course, the communities that he created, the people that he touched and trained, but also the setting of Master's teachings, presenting Master in a way that anybody exposed to this kind of teaching could feel, yes, I too lived with Yoganandaji. In other words, Swamiji didn't sort of keep all of his experience for himself and say, let me tell you how lucky I was. He did it in a way that invited people to say, I feel like I followed in your footsteps, or even directly, I was with Master. And more than that, his legacy, in some ways that's most precious to us, is the way he brought Master to life for us. None of us met Master in the body, but in living with Swamiji and learning from Swamiji and connecting with his consciousness, we felt, and legitimately so, that we were connecting with Master's consciousness. And that suddenly we have memories that go back to 1952, when Master left the body, and even before, even if we weren't born at that time. Somehow there's a sense of continuity and of continuous consciousness. And we focused on music for the first one of these satsangs, and then we went through Swamiji's books in the last satsang, and we decided to share in this satsang a little bit of Swamiji's legacy through his lectures. And the first thing to keep in mind is the incredible wonders of Dwapara Yuga and the gratitude that we have for all those people who recorded Swamiji's lectures at the time that he gave them, so that we have them. There are so many videos on YouTube that you can go through the years, especially on ananda.org. You can see they're sorted by year. You can sort them in other ways too. And just understand how Swamiji connected with people. It's not just public talks. It's also TV shows where he's consciously speaking to the camera, to the audience, which means to you, but also through question and answer sessions and so on. The point is that we might ask, well, what are the value of these lectures? I mean, obviously they have value, but what value is it? After all, in a lecture, you don't, in a book rather, you have the time to carefully say what you're going to say and then edit it and everything and get it exactly right before you press print. But in a talk, once you've said it, it's out there, and you don't always you can't plan it so carefully, and if you do plan it so carefully that you write it in advance, well anyway, never mind. But the point is that Swamiji himself said, I thought that if I could just express clearly enough these teachings in writing, in a book, then everyone reading such a book would say, now I see it, and they would just come and take up the spiritual path. And he said, but now I see that won't ever happen. He said, lectures reach people more immediately because when speaking, you're able to better and more easily transfer your consciousness, or in this case, Master's consciousness, God's consciousness. But it's a clearer transference of consciousness, and that's the value the lectures have today. Now we might be tempted to think, well, that may be true if you're sitting in the audience and he's standing in front of you, but now he's, giving we just have the recordings, and so he doesn't know that I'm listening to the recordings. I wouldn't be too sure. Just yesterday, a friend to me said I was having a question about an experience I was having doing Kriya Yoga, and then I listened to a talk of Swamiji's that I've been listening to, and he suddenly answered the question that I had. And those talks were recorded in the 80s. But you will find that the more you tune in, the more these kinds of things will happen all the time. I find it almost daily that as I'm listening to something Swamiji, a recorded talk of his, I'll find that it's answering my questions, or it's addressing something that has just come up in my life that I haven't been necessarily focusing on, and that it's reminding me that I need to, and so on. And so my point is that the power of these lectures continues, and don't think of them as just historical documents, or think of them as frozen in time, or things that you're studying sort of like for an exam or something like that. Think of them as living windows of Swamiji's consciousness coming to reach you. And so the reason he wrote books, he said, I wrote books because my guru told me to. He was skilled as a writer, but he said, why would I just write just out of skill? What would I share? But my guru told me to, so I wrote. Similarly, his master Yoganandaji, told him to lecture. He said, your work in this life is writing and lecturing. And Swamiji, unlike with writing where he had an affinity for it, he said, I don't want to do that. Certainly lecture. And Master said, in great sympathy and with great understanding and comfort, you'd better learn to like it. That's what you have to do. And I say that jokingly because Swami would say it too. He said, you hear about a master's unconditional love. Gee whiz, this is what he told me. You'd better learn to like it. It's what you have to do. But why didn't Swamiji want to do it? I mean, why would he have a feeling one way or another? He explains at another time that he said so many of the ministers, as Dr. Lewis put it, Master's first disciple in America, he said they get up there and blow. Just, we sometimes say, expelling hot air into the room. Just going and just talking, but not necessarily from inspiration, not necessarily even from Master's teachings. It can be, I'm not criticizing them, I'm saying this is as it was reported. Master himself said that too many of the ministers speak from their own experience. They get entranced by the attention. This is one of the great dangers of being a lecturer. Swamiji even said he saw a young man at Ananda who desperately wanted to lecture, and that Swamiji knew that if he didn't give him that opportunity, he would just leave outright. And at the same time, he was concerned that if he did give him that opportunity, that it would just go to his head. It would just grow his ego, and he would leave anyway. But given a choice between definitely leaving and maybe leaving, he gave him the opportunity to lecture. But again, I mean, unfortunately, it did go to his head, and he did leave. And there was another teacher who would go in and out of lecturing. Swamiji would sometimes have her lecture, sometimes he wouldn't. And then he had another man teaching who, in her estimation, was very egotistical. And she said, "You're concerned that I have ego, but what about this guy? Look at all the ego he has. You're saying I have more ego than him?" And Swamiji said, he doesn't have ego around teaching. And so she understood that that is the danger. And Swamiji, when Master said to him that so many of these ministers just speak from their own experience and just enjoy attention, Swamiji said, "That's why I don't want to be a lecturer." And Master said this time, he said because of ego was what they were talking about, going to the speaker's ego. Master said, "You will never fall due to ego." And so that's an important thing to remember too. How many of us would love to hear Master reassure us, "You will never fall due to ego." What a statement that is from Master, and what a statement it is about Swamiji, and one to keep in mind. So I wanted to share a little bit of a historical perspective, but also place it in time for its relevance for all of us, because again, these are not things that happened in the past, any more than Swamiji's books. Well, they were written in the past, but of course they're fresh and alive and relevant for each of us today, both generally to the times we live in, but even more preciously, specifically to what's going on inside your own heart, inside your own journey. So let me share a few things here. Swamiji began in 1950. That's when he began his first. Thank you, Napoleon. Are you zooming in on the blue screen? Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see if it remains blue. Yes. Okay. Let's see if we can help it along here. Just kind of moving things and hoping it will eventually work. Okay, let's see if it will automatically do it, or else I'll do it. Do you see stars, or do you see something else?
Stars.
There. No,
Galaxy.
Galaxy. Okay, hold on a second. That's nice, but not my intention.
Now we see screen resolution.
Okay, so this is a very short video, but it shows Swamiji in 1950, after Master had made him a minister in the Hollywood Church, which was Master's main church in the city of Los Angeles. It's a very short clip, but this is Swamiji here. But it's what we have from that time. And he's wearing the robes that Master had the ministers wear for giving discourses. I'll play that again. When I say minister, thank you, Dharmini's reminded me. When I say minister, I mean Acharya. Master called everybody a minister. It doesn't mean railway minister or solid waste management or minister or anything like that. No, Acharya. And a master, of course, would have used the word Acharya, but it wouldn't make sense to anybody in 1950 in California. So Swamiji was the main minister in the Hollywood Temple. I'm going to say minister every now and then and just translate in your head to Acharya, because I just can't help it. So this was a groundbreaking ceremony on that land for the creation of a new bookstore. And the point is we have very few photos from this era, so in one sense, any photo we can show, we're glad to show. But it's also just important to see that Swamiji was the head minister, the head acharya there, and obviously as such he was, his fellow disciples were having him make the first, dig into the ground for the groundbreaking for this new property, new building. This was 1951, January 5th, Master's birthday. And you may recognize what these people are engaged in doing back in 1951. If you don't recognize it, it's the energization exercises. And you see here on there's a pickup truck, which was used as a stage. And there's Swamiji demonstrating for everybody what to do. This picture, unfortunately, hasn't come out very well. It's from a newspaper. But it has Master here. And this is the ambassador from India, Binay Sen. This is 1952, March 5th, 2 days before Master's Mahasamadhi. And here is Swamiji here. After Master's passing, this is a photo from 1953, and it's in the temple in Encinitas. And one of the reasons why I wanted to share it with you is because you see here Master's most advanced disciple, Saint Lin, Rajarsi Janakananda. You've heard of us speak of him. And this is Dr. Lewis here, Master's first disciple, and his wife, Mrs. Lewis. And then Durga Mata, who some of you also know. She has written a book about Master as well, and so on. And Swamiji said she was a very deep disciple. And Swamiji is here on the end. This was again greeting people for a special function at the temple there. This is again in 1953, outside Hollywood Temple. This is a fun one. Come and hear Christ consciousness through yoga. October 22nd. This was 1956. Then he gave another lecture, Reincarnation, Truth or Myth. Thursday. That was on Thursday. This was in Vancouver, in Canada. Reverend Brother Kriyananda, lecturer of Self-Realization Fellowship, International Headquarters, is a disciple of Paramhansa Yogananda. For further particulars, so you can see, now we advertise on Facebook, but it all started back here. And then this is one nice thing about this is that it's in color. In 1958, Swamiji this is when this was taken, this is in Italy. And Swamiji, as head of all the centers throughout the world, would travel throughout the world, visiting the different centers of SRF. And as you can see here, does anyone recognize these pictures here? You see it pictures right here, right there. You see the unbroken line. And lastly, this is a photo from a Kriya initiation in 1960. And one of the special things about it is, of course, it has Swamiji at the harmonium, but also this was the first Kriya initiation ever given in Australia. And so it was a very special moment, he said. So, rather than go through talking about Swamiji's lectures, we thought it might be nice for us all to hear from him directly about his process of speaking and sharing. So it's Swamiji in his own words, you might say. So we'll now play clips from a few videos of him sharing this.